To me, being admired is the essence of everything because you are not going to buy admiration, you have to earn admiration.
That is Shyam Srinivasan.
We're tossing a million bricks in the air, right? When it falls down, it has to assemble to be a magnificent castle. So that dream magnificent castle is that most admired bank that I'm seeking.
Shyam served as MD and CEO of Federal Bank for 14 years and is today the senior advisor to TVS Capital Funds.
You mentioned RBI gave the license. It's precious, let me tell you that. I've had instances when regulators have called and told banks, bankers, listen, this can be taken away from you.
On this episode, I pick Shyam's brain in a fantastical attempt to build the world's greatest bank. Through this process, Shyam explains what really matters in the lending business and what separates the men from the boys in the financial sector. Thank you for joining us on the Krish Kothari Show. We hope you enjoy the conversation. As always, nothing in this video is investment advice, nor a recommendation to or not to buy, sell, or hold any security. We're happy to partner with the Zero On Media Network to bring you useful and interesting insights and information from the world of business and investing. So go ahead and like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Shyam bhai, thank you so much for coming on. Welcome to the Krish Kothari Show.
Thank you so much. Look forward to a nice chat.
I'm so glad you decided to come on, and my goal through this conversation is to go on this ambitious, fantastical journey with you of creating the world's greatest bank. I'm going to ask that you humor me and play along, and my hope is that in that process, we'll actually get a very serious conversation, an important conversation on what it means to build a good bank and what it is to be a good banker. So I want you to imagine for a second that you have no past or present affiliation to any bank. You and I decide to go into business, and the RBI comes to us and says, Shyam, I like the cut of your jib. Here's a universal banking license. Now, what are the first steps to create a truly important and successful bank?
Wow. It's a nice journey to be on. But I can't take myself away from myself. So I'll have to reflect back on the 34, 35 years as a banker and what sort of shaped me through that, right? And I'll try to do this journey with you reflecting on those years. The most recent job as the MD of Federal Bank, we framed a line, and I probably copy that line for our yet to be named bank. We want to be the most admired bank. To me, being admired is the essence of everything. Because you are not going to buy admiration, you have to earn admiration. Banking is a trust business, right? People put money and they want it to be safe and they want to feel comfortable with the franchise they engage with. So in our journey of building the best, we must seek to build the most admired bank. So the hypothetical, mythical bank that we are building, let it be pursuing excellence and pursuing the most admired journey. And in all journeys, that's my personal beliefs. I believe that the creating team or the founding team, whatever you call it, have to have one fundamental principle, actually two fundamental principles. One is should remain happily dissatisfied. Right? Nothing could satisfy us, but equally need not be distraught or unhappy. So one principle. The second is whatever we do, should be able to tell mom. Right. So my two principles from your point of view, the bank that we seek to build out, is one is to build the most admired bank. The founder, the creator, the origination team should remain resolutely dissatisfied but happy. Because that keeps you restless. So one is what we want to build. Two is what characteristics we bring. Three is what we are guided by. Whatever we do in a bank, particularly in a bank, we should be able to proudly tell mom. And so if you are happy to work on that bank, we will start and take that license from RBI and try to build on it.
It's interesting whenever someone says something like that on the last point, which is mom should be okay with whatever I'm doing. I always think of Buffett's, he had this fantastic way of gauging whether an action should be, whether you should go through with an action or not. And it was this thought exercise where imagine that whatever you're going to do or thinking of doing, a fair but unfriendly reporter is going to write an article on that in tomorrow's newspaper, and everyone you know is going to read that article. Are you going to be able to show your face in society the following day? And if the answer is no, you probably shouldn't be doing that. It's interesting that in some sense, your first port of call in building a bank was the founding team and the people. And I think I want to start there and ask that in a bank, how do you pick, and at least I'm saying now more at the higher levels, how do you actually go about picking the right people? And what are the key characteristics that you are looking for in those people?
If you are seeking to build something special, first you must understand it takes time. Right? I am never of the belief that you start and in 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, 2 years, it just doesn't happen. You may have some early wins and you should, but these are long journeys. And in any long journey, there are going to be a bunch of stuff that's frustrating. So the first thing I would ask for this founding team is to have auto-psych themselves to be very patient, dissatisfied, happy, and patient. That triangulation of that is very difficult. But in our search for people, we must find those kind of people. And often that comes when the founding team are credible in their communication of that and are not saying it but behaving differently. If Shyam or Krish or whoever that leadership is going to be, ask for these, but are anything less than these three things integrated in their behavior, you will soon lose the best of the team members. So I think when we seek the team out, I would look for people who exhibit this, not exhibit historically, but exhibit prospectively, because in the leadership, they're seeing these on display all the time. Then many people are willing to sign up and partner in this. I use this as an example, which I learned from a boss of mine and then in the bank numerous times, is that we're tossing 1 million bricks in the air, right? When it falls down, it has to assemble to be a magnificent castle. So that dream magnificent castle is that most admired bank that I'm seeking. As I speak to you in my mind's eye, I'm seeing that magnificent castle. But I also am acutely aware that castle cannot form, the bricks can fall and just be, sort of all over the place. That assembly of the bricks when it comes to being that magnificent castle is that dream bank. And that happens when you do one by one by one by one laboriously over a long period of time. And that means the team should reflect that characteristic. At least at the core membership of the team. There will always be some outliers, and sometimes it's good to have some outliers who behave differently and challenge the core. But at heart, this is what I would like to build on.
What do you think would be a good name for the bank?
I'll tell you, we can find, I'm sure there are smarter people who will come up with more clear names. To borrow Shakespeare's line, what's in a name? It is experience and credibility, and that is always built over time. Right? I can stand on Nepean Road, Churchgate, whatever, and scream from the rooftop saying, trust me. That's all you will. You're not going to trust me till you experience, trust is earned, right? So, banking is a trust business. We could be the most digital franchise. Right? We need to be experienced. People are putting their, even if it's 10 rupees, 1,000 rupees, 1 crore, 10 crores, they're putting their money. And there is no bank if there's no money. There's no raw material with money. The bank's raw material is money. Right? It's now that many are realizing the fundamental principle of banking is fund before you lend. Right? If resources were available infinitely, you could lend at random. But we've seen most recently, and we're living through that, right? It can just come to a grinding halt if the resources are not in place. I can't underline the importance of trust. And leadership, and I'm not saying an individual, it's the senior leadership or the governance chain, has to be exemplar on that dimension. You fail that, you compromise that on one occasion, the world is sort of just hard on punishing you. You have no choice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sound boring, but I'll say if you don't get your trust dimension right in banking, the most sophisticated, sexiest, super extravagant products have only that much bite. And banking is a volume business, scale business, people business, right? With numerous touch points. The vulnerability or the opportunity for any touch point to fail is always there. You and I are talking here, and we have a bank, let's say, with 1,000 branches,
Yeah.
hypothetically. A branch manager in branch number 344 in somewhere in deep interior of Nashik or somewhere puts his hand in the till. Your franchise comes to a stop, right? So how do you ensure that Mr. X in Nashik in that branch
Yeah.
is as committed to the cause that you as the founder have and the regulator has given you, that the license is precious. You mentioned RBI gave the license. It's precious, let me tell you that. I've had instances when regulators have called and told banks, bankers, listen, this can be taken away from you in like that.
Yeah. When you're actually building out a bank, you have to build out both sides of the balance sheet. And let's start with the liability side. If you are genuinely starting from scratch or somewhere near scratch, what do you think is the best way to build out that liability franchise? And in your own experience, do you think that there are things that people think work but actually don't?
See, I think there may be no, in my judgment, there's no one template for it. Because if you, it's very time of life
Right.
centric call. The world is getting way more digital, and therefore your ability to have superior digital capabilities, self-service capabilities are now paramount. But I think it's become par for the course. It's no longer a material differentiator, right? So the physical digital mix has to be there for any new startup too. The question is who and what is the person standing behind that franchise, and how well capitalized you are. These two are great starting points. If the individual, the fact that the regulator has given the license gives you some kind of credibility. A bank, it's not an NBFC, right? So it gives you some credibility and standing. If you or I or X or Y or Z has got it, chances are we've had a track record. Now, the curious and funny part is, while we advertise fund before you lend as the basic tenet, relatively lending is an easier job than collecting money,
For sure.
right? Because there's always somebody in need of credit, right? But as a banker, if you understand that dynamic, you are going to be wise to go and bank somebody who needs the lending because you have the money, the capital. But you start cultivating that customer's all requirements, therefore he gives you his flows of money. So the cash flow starts coming to you. So it's a very engaging relationship. The moment you do is transactional, you do, so I'll give you a 5 lakh loan and then I won't meet you again and you'll pay me on due date. That's one kind of business model. But a startup bank would need to do a little more cultivating your core cohort of customers, the early ones,
Yeah.
to encourage them to bank with you for much more than just that one credit borrowing need. So we
Correct.
have to find a way for them to be slowly work your way. At least you are bank number 2, 3, 4, 5 in some manner of speaking for that person. Then you get a flow of money.
Yeah.
And you start trapping their cash flows, and then you start building your liability franchise. So you need to start with the credibility of the franchise owner. You need to get capital. You would probably start with a lending product to make sure that you have something to get that person to engage with you. Then start getting their flows, for which you need good digital capabilities. starting is not easy. I mean, you inherit a bank
Yeah.
and refresh it and redo it is a lot easier than starting from a clean sheet of paper, because you need that patience and time. It has to be somebody way younger and deeper pockets to get started on a bank. It takes time. It takes 20, 25 years. And today we are celebrating the HDFCs and the ICICIs. I mean, they started 30 years ago or whatever, right? And they're names of repute. If you were to start yesterday morning, it would take you another 20 years. But the world is a very different world.
Shambhai, this is sounding like a lot of work. I don't know if I want this license anymore. There's a famous saying in banking and lending more generally that it's the only business where every time you make a sale, money leaves the door. So obviously a very large part of the head of a bank or the senior management at a bank is figuring out who to lend to, who deserves that credit. In your experience, what has been the best way to gauge potential borrowers? And is it the case that until the money has actually exchanged hands, you never truly know who you've gotten into bed with?
Not only until you leave the door, until he repays, you don't know. But I'll tell you, I don't do. See, there is no one model, right? If you talk of a 1 lakh loan or a 500 crore loan, the spectrum is too wide.
Yeah.
The relatively retail, smaller ticket or templatable or programmable kind of loans, you rely more on data analytics, past history, bureau history, a bunch of stuff which algorithmically you can decide, because gone are the days when you are able to meet every client and assess it. So as you go up the spectrum, from salaried to self-employed, to self-employed professionals, then to businessmen, and in businessmen, small, medium, big, and the large corporates, and the whole spectrum. Your choice moves from very heuristic models to very using 360 degree assessment of the client. And invariably, looking at the balance sheet alone is never the story. I mean, those are important, necessary, but never sufficient. Right? So as you go up the big ticket lending, you need to know the promoter or the corporate and the culture way more. And the better lenders across time have always understood that it's 3 layers below that you have to dig to understand. It's no longer easy to lend. I know him, I know her, she'll pay. That's okay for a smaller ticket and shorter tenor. These big tickets, longer tenor is very hard to judge, and you need to know a bunch of this. But if you ask me, I mean, if I were to be the last signatory on that loan, I want to look at the eye of the guy and say, what is his compulsion to take that, and whether they will honor it. It's judgment. Of course, a lot of science and data and analytics helps, but finally that judgment is important, and experience is the best teacher for that. I mean, there are times when you could have got it wrong, but when you get it wrong, do you have the best architecture for recovery? Particularly bigger tickets, right? That's the beauty of a good bank and a not so good bank. Right? Have you just been on a whim? I met him at the golf club and he looks like a good guy, let me lend. I think that's a bad lending decision. But you've done a bunch of stuff and you met him at the golf club and golf course, and you found great chemistry and integrity, then that marriage is, But yet the structure and the ability to get the money back is often the biggest strength that good banks have exhibited.
Do you remember the first time you ever sanctioned a really large loan?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the early part of my career was retail, right? Only in my, the last 15 years, I did big ticket credits.
Yeah.
So, but even in the early part of my retail life, and then I'm talking of 2001, so 24 years back, I made the grave error, and I'm using lucky that it came out okay, but the grave mistake of deciding on lending to a very prominent name because it was a prominent name, and got conned that it was actually not the prominent name, somebody masking that, masquerading as that prominent name. And that recovery process required a lot of jasusgiri, which we thankfully did. But that period between saying yes to the extending that line of credit and recovering that money was torturous, but an outstanding personal learning. Because we made the decision to give, as a retail banker, if I'm talking of 2001 to a 56 lakh loan, 56 lakh rupees was not small, right? 25 years back. But we made the call, or I made the call to do that loan, believing that it was that so-called big name who would be good for his name. It just happened that it was not him, but somebody masking or masquerading as him, and took the money. And once the money goes in, then you are up to the time the lender has the check with him, he's the boss.
Yeah.
The money goes away, then you're groveling at the feet of the borrower. So it was a extraordinarily tough few weeks, I would say. But thankfully, money came. But that was because of an outstanding investigative work by the team that we pulled the money back. But that learning was a life message for me. Right? How do you not get carried away by brand names, by just the social presence of somebody, and take that call and look very popular when you say instantly yes? And I could have been badly bruised if that money had not come.
So, Shyam, how do you not be influenced by someone's social presence and brand name?
See, I think that, Krish, is the beauty of an organization model you have to create. First is, particularly in banking, this whim-based lending, he is my friend, she is my friend, let's go ahead, they're good for the money, we have to slowly distance ourselves from them, institutionally. And that happens when, even if the MD or whoever the senior most person, the decision maker, should have institutionalized check and balance. Right? You have the so-called conscience keeper standing and ask that question. Even if it's the Shyam Srinivasan, you're the boss man, you know the business, you're good, you're saying yes. This voice should be able to ask the question. The franchise allows him or her to challenge this. Right? And not resist it. The lesson that I have learned and I encourage always is origination and underwriting is separate. And the underwriter is as empowered as the originator, and they are able to have healthy and sometimes fist fights too. The years of experience teaches me that the mid and back office need not be subservient to the front office. They have to be empowered to be standing up and challenging this. In fact, if you see the current paradigm, the regulators are also constantly promoting the reporting lines, the structure of a bank, any large financial institution, because they have fiduciary responsibilities, right? I think that era of I took the call, I know him, is slowly, and rightfully, slowly going away.
My dad has always jokingly told me that if you ever borrow money from a bank, make sure it's very large, because if you borrow 10 lakhs, repayment is your problem. If you borrow 10,000 crores, repayment is the bank's problem.
Absolutely, yeah.
Of course, that's said in jest, but when you hear things like that, do you think it's an unfair assessment of banks?
No, I think it's that era of trying to evergreen, trying to be very front-heavy, mid-back light, has slowly evaporated. Regulations, particularly, I think the Indian regulators have been, with each passing year, tighter, tougher, and clearer on how they want that franchise to be. If I take the 90s and the 20s and the 2025s, what's markedly changed in the banking system in India, and it's likely to be even more in the periods ahead, is not that we are discovering some new truths, but we are discovering the way of delivering that truth,
Okay.
right? Monitoring that truth, governing that truth, and asking that question. So if you see, and I had the privilege of being an MD for 14 years of a bank, right? And I can tell you personally, from when I started to when I ended, the governance demands, if we, on a scale of 10, if it was say 5, when I left it was 12. Matlab, that much it had shifted.
Yeah.
So the governance chain of a franchise, the board, the management team, the senior management team, spend, and probably are likely to in the periods ahead, spend a larger part of the time being the one who asks the tough questions and doesn't settle for flimsy answers. And sort of probes. I mean, we've seen in the last 10 years, unfortunately, every 2 years or whatever, some franchise NBFC bank blows out as a problem. And you poke deep, it was not something that happened overnight. It had happened 3, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 6 years, surfaced at some point in time. And it didn't surface earlier because somewhere in the chain, it was either masked or less appreciated or less cared for. So the governance chains have to have the ability to spot that and nip it earlier than later. So long answer to your question is, in that bank that we are building, or a good bank, is all about finding those early and being adamantly and resolutely ensuring that it's nipped before it becomes a problem.
Isn't a necessary corollary to that the man or woman at the top has to be brutally demanding, unrelenting in his or her questioning of the team? Do you think that the job of the MD and CEO has become in some ways more taxing than it was, say, 25 years back?
Beyond a shadow of doubt.
Yeah.
But I would only add that it is not just the MD and CEO, I think it's a larger canvas of management, senior management, whatever you call it. But equally, the toolkit available is also improved.
Okay.
Right? If you, as the leader or leadership, are focused on delivering that high quality franchise, which you should be, you need to be equipping yourselves with all the material and toolkit that is available and not giving it a pass. Now, whether you do it demandingly, undemandingly, softly, as Theodore Roosevelt said, right? Speak softly, carry a big stick. That's a good leadership style.
Yeah.
Right? You have to speak softly, but you have to be demanding.
Yeah.
And not for personal gains, but for institutional franchise building.
Right.
Those are leadership characteristics, traits of an individual. But if you've heard or seen any of the often comments I make, is particularly banking is a boring business. How do I make it sexy? Right? It's a humdrum daily stuff, but I have to make it sexy. My all-time sport favorite is either a Rahul Dravid or a Roger Federer. And why? Because they have been doing the hard yards all the time relentlessly, which is what you said, relentlessly. But both don't have a bearing of being rude exteriors. But I'm sure they are hard interiors, right? So I think that's a good leadership style to have. That's my personal favorite style. I'm not saying I exhibited it, but I'm saying that's what I like. And therefore, in the bank that we build, we will put that as a core characteristic, so to say.
The man in the arena has to be that. It has to be that. And do you remember? Do you remember the largest ever single loan you sanctioned?
Oh yeah.
And tell me something. So I mean, I don't expect you to divulge
No,
details.
I can't give you the name, but yes.
Yeah, but I'm saying I imagine there's many zeros in that check.
Many. I don't know how many they are.
I mean, this is a very human. I know we're all professionals and all of that, but ultimately we're human. And when you're signing that check, I mean, I know you're not literally signing it, but sanctioning it, however you do it. Are you a bundle of no's at that point? Or does just with time and experience do you get over that?
I think, the second part, the first time you do it was the 10th time you do it, and 20th time you do it, it's different, right? When you've learnt it and
But I mean that one where it's really larger than normal.
Each time there is that... but invariably, your model should be that you are not the only one approving that. I mean, the beauty of our system, at least the banks that I worked with, and I think all good banks, you can't centralize in the hand of one. It's invariably a very seasoned senior committee who have taken a bunch of criteria and advised by many analyzing teams before you make that call. But all said, finally, that if it's a prominent leading industrial house or big group which is very prominent and known, you're biased to giving it and the money will come back because the other man or other company or the other industrial house don't want next morning to be in the newspaper saying they're defaulted, right? Those are parameters that you bake into your decision making. All said, when you've given 1,000 crores out or whatever, you have to live with some tension. I don't believe, which is why bank seniors or large corporate seniors have a crease on their forehead, and it's hard to believe that you may portray a very comfortable existence, but you are living on, walking on eggshells. That's part of life.
Yeah.
I mean, I have, after I left the job, that way less nervous, but I live. Even today, somebody can call me up and say, hey, a loan you gave me some 2016, has conversations that we need to have. I'm obliged.
Yeah. It lives with you forever, right? You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So, Shyam, coming back to our wonderful bank.
It's admired bank.
Most admired, most wonderful bank. It's 2025. We have the advantage of having no legacy. We don't have to deal with any mistakes or decisions of the past. In that context, you have to make the crucial decision of whether you should go into this branch empire building path, go down that path, or you want to go very heavy on digital and branches should be few and far between in very strategic positions. How do you think about that debate in the context of the current technologies and what may be the technologies in the next 5-10 years? And how do you think about which of those is the right path?
The mantra that I'm in some ways claim sort of an author of, I believe in digital at the fore, human at the core. That's my personal mantra, what my last bank we were using as our guiding principle, if you will. And I don't think in the most admired bank that I'm working with you to build, we would stray far away from that principle. Right? With that as the sort of guiding principle, I would certainly not build a digital-only bank. Right? The temptation is to do a digital-only franchise, believing that in the new age, digital only works very well and people will be happy to do a pure digital bank. Experience has taught me, I think it's still relevant, that people like to connect to a physical branch. They may not walk in ever, but they need to know that it exists. A large part of the younger, urban, salaried, new age population. But the beauty about India is, if you carve out India as digitally very friendly, digitally least friendly, economically not well off, to economically very well off, and simplify it into these 4 quadrants, you will find each of those quadrants has such a huge population to deal with. Digitally very friendly, economically very well to do, probably easy to serve them only digitally. Economically very well off, but digitally unfriendly, which is a large part of India, yet you need to do a physical presence. So, and go back to our fund before lend theory. If you don't have the resources to lend, you can't lend. So you need to build a large liability base. And the liability base is not concentrated only in the top right quadrant, it's all across. So you need a physical presence. Now you could argue a physical presence need not be in Nepean Sea Road with 4,000 square feet. It could be in some deep, in a gully somewhere or some part of India or rural India, tier 3 India, tier 4 India, and a smaller physical outlet which has all the digital capabilities. Mr. X or Y or Mrs. X or Y or Miss X or Y need not walk in, but they know that it exists. So I would build the franchise as digitally fortified, but smaller, cuter, convenient physical presence, which is not very intimidating, but there and not too extravagant. The first 3-4 years of that. By the time it's 2030, the world would have probably had more AI influence.
Yeah.
We will think about it. But early stage, we need both.
Specific to physical branches, what have you learned about what do customers actually care about? Do they care that the branch is fancy? Do they care that the person behind them is smiling? Do these things matter?
You can't generalize it because you, younger, new age, may not even go to a branch. And if you ever did, it may be more transactional.
Right.
You often talk of your dad. If he walks in, he would want a different experience. He would want that young officer or young manager to sit him down, give him a chai, chat him up, talk about how Krish is doing. And in the bargain, the transaction is happening, right? Both characteristics exist, and it's not just two; it's spectrum of transactions. So, but the look and feel of that franchise should be welcoming and not intimidating. Should be, I don't have to come in and feel unwelcomed. When I walk in, I should feel like I'm coming home, right? Which is what conventionally bank branches were. Many years back, the person walked in, he felt like, post office, the postman is known to be your person who knows you other than your saloon and barber and your family members. They know you best. The bank manager was one. And history teaches us that it's a very established good model for one category of people. Why should we not exploit that, right? We should offer that.
Yeah.
Your branch doesn't have to have a Hussein painting and a Pablo Picasso or anything. It just needs to be clean, welcoming, and simple and non-intimidating. You walk for the large part of the audience. Yeah, you could have a private bank, a lounge. You could do all those things. But I think for a large part of many average Indian citizens, they need to feel comfortable. They go there. It's vernacular, English, whatever. They can speak. They can connect. They can get the transaction done relatively easily and friction-free. So that's what I would do in the branch.
I'm going to take you back to something you said in one of your earlier responses, which was the importance of looking across the table and sizing up the man opposite you. I can only imagine the characters you've encountered over your time as a banker, both good and bad. But what have all those experiences taught you little more generally on people?
Humanity in generally is a very trusting and giving community, generally. There will always be some exceptions. That's my positive lens on everything. Now, as a branch manager or an officer in a branch or a lender, you have to have some skepticism in your decisioning because you are not dealing with your money, you're dealing with somebody else's money. So you can't be always in this, I am going to say yes, irrespective of how irresponsible the demand is. So the manager or the lender or the person on this side of the table should be able to discern that and yet not be dismissive. It's very difficult, but that's a skill I have. The team has to build. Right? And able to communicate that and ask searching questions that give you comfort that he or she is not walked into hoodwink. In the new age, there are new skills. If somebody is walking into a branch only to borrow in today's environment, is already a red flag in some sense. He or she has probably turned been turned away on many other instances. Not to say that that's a bad outcome, but it's a
Question mark.
parameter you want to keep in your mind. Why would he or she walk in and ask for a 5 lakh or a 20 lakh loan when there are 10 people showing up at their doorstep? Did they reject it? Or did their documentation not meet up standards? Or is it an impersonation going on? Right? You could have many red flags, and it's good as a lender to be thoughtful about it. I'm not saying we should say no, but be thoughtful about it. And, there are tools available today that allow for you to check that right away. Civil record, the bunch of other platforms that give public domain data of everybody, social media data, structured data, unstructured data, all at the click of a button you can get it. So as you're speaking to Krish, I can still check on my screen and I'll know full Ram Kahani. A large part of Ram Kahani.
Yeah.
Now, if I get comfort that Krish is indeed Krish and has come for a bona fide, I should go the distance. Otherwise, I should be politely able to fend you off. These are both an art and a science. Right? Good organizations, since we are building one, have to institutionalize that in every officer at every desk. And tools are available. That's why I said digital at the core, human at the core. What in the bank that I was part of, we made sure, and I'm sure they're doing even better today, made sure that every employee has access at the front end. He or she can touch and type and get that data, and a bunch of prop questions he can ask instantly. Because a young officer may not have been trained sufficiently, but the AI or a Copilot, Microsoft Copilot or whatever that tool that is there allows me to ask those questions even if I am not fully informed. The screen is telling me. I have a bunch of prompt questions to ask you. And I have to be able to, the discipline of that work, the manager on the ground has to do it. And that's the beauty, the mid-mart bank that we're building. Those are I think the lessons I have learned and I try to impart very often is military-like discipline at the last point, delivered in a very friendly manner, distinguishes you from being very good or just good. And good is the enemy of great. We all know that. Right? If you're chasing greatness, which we should, chasing perfection, which we should, then those last 30 steps or last 30 seconds make a material difference than the first 29 minutes that you spent on. And that's hard. That's where you have to institutionalize that as an institutional capability and doing that. And time and history has taught us those who have lived that better have been success over long periods of time. If you saw Federer's, that video of Dartmouth College, he said his job was everybody said he's effortless. He said that irritated him like crazy because his effortlessness was because of the hours of effort he put behind the scene, which was less visible to anyone. Same thing. I think my recent post on, tower on trenches is you have to be grinding the yards in the trenches. And I think this is a good question you asked me, and I had a chance to express this.
It's so interesting that you, as far as banking and lending is concerned, you can talk so much about strategy, and somehow ultimately ghuma fira ke it all comes back to people, despite all the technology that exists today. So let's take it again in the context of our bank. We've got the strategy in place. We figured out how many branches we want. The top management is in place. Now we need to start thinking of the younger blood in the organization. We need to start hiring people, going to colleges, campuses. The challenge that I see, to some extent at least, is if you go to the top school, say business schools in India or globally, as far as I can tell, the most capable kids want to go join some startup and figure out how to get me to click on ads somewhere. Are the best people in these schools today interested in going and becoming a banker? Is this going to be a problem 25 years down the line that the best people are not becoming bankers the way they were, say, 30, 40 years back?
I am going to challenge that question. What is best? In what dimension do you determine best? Academic brilliance? It's important. See, the beauty of many of these jobs, these are wonderfully trainable if you have the will. So I personally choose for will and not skill. Skill is givable, trainable, replicable, Googleable, co-pilotable, AIable. But will is from within. So you hire people who have the will, and sometimes it comes from people who are less privileged. If you've had academic privileges, wealth privileges, lifestyle privileges, chances are you may not have, I don't want to sound generic in generalization, but chances are you may be more tilted towards the higher end of the spectrum of jobs. But some of the jobs, particularly in banking, is just, like I said, making boring sexy is the toughest job of a leader on long periods of time.
Yeah.
And that has to come because you've brought that institutionally, you bring people with a ton of will, build skills to find the people who have that will, and just give them enormous opportunity to exhibit that at work. And skill them. And the beauty of today's technology is that skill is learnable on the job at the point of time because the technology is jumping in front of you. So I think in banking, passage of time, and it's already and it's likely to be, a large part of the workforce, of course, the top 10% you may go to the a different profile of people to recruit, but it's a replicable capability that has to come using all the techniques and tools and learning at the point of occurrence, but using the core desire of the person to be exceptionally wanting to do that.
Okay, let me ask you, if you were 25 today, graduating IIM, would you do what you did, how many ever years back? Would you go and become a banker?
I would say yes, because I mentally, my tuning is doing the dirty stuff early and then growing up. But if you ask a young bride, I am Ahmedabad or whatever, a youngster coming out of campus, he may want the more glamorous, sexier job, which is like an investment banker, mergers and acquisitions and stuff like that, which is perfectly fine. But the beauty about our country or any large entity, the IIMs produce maybe like 4,000 people a year. We need like 1 lakh employees every year, the banking system, 50,000 employees. So you will pick from anywhere. So the job family will vary. If you want a person into retail collections, which is the one end of the spectrum of a job, he or she may not be the most sophisticated premium institution person, but you just want him or her to have integrity and a willingness to do hard work. The system can give them the skills to become exceptional. Then they branch out into other things over a period of time because they have use techniques to find out how smart they are and give them opportunities bigger than what they bargained for.
Yeah.
He could become a credit leader, he could be anything, right? So the vertical domains that exist in a bank today are much, much more than what it existed 25 years back. Right? And therefore, you could become executive director collections of a bank, which is like a 50 lakh balance sheet, 50 lakh crore balance sheet, which is a mega job.
Yeah.
That didn't exist 25 years back. And 25 years later, I don't know what else will exist. But I know at the heart will be will, data, integrity, an obsession for execution cannot go away. That's my view.
It's fascinating talking to someone who has a luxury of thinking of things with the benefit of hindsight and doesn't have to sort of guess what the dots are, right? He has the ability to connect them because he's actually experienced it. I genuinely want to take the chance to thank you for agreeing to do this, taking the time. Wonderful talking to you. I really can't thank you enough.
Thanks. I quite enjoyed this. And I do hope at the end of it, we have that most admired bank. And I hope RBI calls us with a new license. It'll be a nice outcome. But thank you very much.
It's on tap now, so any minute.
I wish I had the capital for that. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Great.
you.